Nexus PMG welcomes you to the Bigger Than Us podcast, which we as energy geeks lovingly refer to as the BTU. Bigger Than Us is a podcast that focuses on ideas that will shape the future of our planet and ultimately our existence. We will occasionally lean into energy topics because, after all, it's the key to our collective survival. But we'll also explore other ideas and topics that we believe will have an impact that is bigger than us. And now, on to today's show. Hello, and welcome to the Bigger Than Us podcast. I'm your host, Raj Daniels, and today I'd like to welcome Sara Enright to the show. Sara Enright is a director of collaboration at Bsr, the Business for Social Responsibility, where she oversees the design and facilitation of a portfolio of private sector collaborations that contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. Bsr is an organization of sustainable business experts that works with its global network of the world's leading companies to build a just and sustainable world. Sara, how are you doing today?
Thank you, Raj. I'm doing very well today, and thank you for inviting us to the show.
Sara, I'm so glad you could join. Sara, I'd like to start out with a question after doing some research on BSR. In your opinion, what does a just and sustainable world mean to you?
It's a good question. So BSR's mission is to create a more just and sustainable world, and we work with multinational companies as our partners in achieving that mission. We work with them through consulting as well as through multi-stakeholder collaboration to try and advance against that mission. A more just and sustainable world is one, in my mind, in which everybody who lives on this planet is able to benefit from the enormous innovation and resources that we as a human species have been able to develop over time. And so in that, I see that poverty and people who are living in circumstances where they're not able to access the same levels of education, healthcare, and other innovations that the majority of us are able to access. I see that as a design flaw and something that needs to be worked on for everybody to be able to participate in a more just and sustainable world.
Interesting idea about a design flaw. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. I was thinking about this when we had the space race recently, in a world in which we have some of the world's most wealthy individuals able to build their own rockets and go into space. It seems to me pretty atrocious that we also have billions of people continuing to live in poverty without access to decent nutrition and food and water. I believe that at this point in our development, poverty is a choice that we are making and that we can unmake.
Poverty is a choice that we are making. That's very deep, Sara. I appreciate that. And since you mentioned BSR, can you give the audience an overview of BSR and your role at the organization?
Sure. I'm the director of collaboration at BSR, and we're a team of sustainability experts. I mentioned that we work with multinational companies around the world, and as well as stakeholder partners, to build a more just and sustainable world. We have global teams based in Asia, Europe, and North America, and we've been around since the 1990s and really experienced the full curve of how corporate social responsibility has turned into a movement for corporate sustainability and seeking of purpose over the past couple of years. So we advise companies and work with them both on a consultancy basis as well as through hosting multi-stakeholder collaborations. And my role at BSR is to really oversee the business model that we have for hosting those collaborative initiatives, making sure that they're sustainable not only in their high impact focus on environmental, social, or governance issues, but also in how they're financed and operated so that we can be there for the long run.
So you mentioned the early days of BSR. I think my research shows it started in 1992. So some would argue that's one generation, at least 20 or 30 years. So let's just call it 30 years now. What do you think has changed in the last 30 years that's drawn so much more attention to the ideas about, you mentioned diversity, poverty, etc.?
It's an interesting question. I think I can only really speak to my own experience, which has been the past 15 years. I'd say I've been working in this field myself actively. And even in that short period of time, I've seen the attention to social and economic development shift from one of philanthropy and engaging in through philanthropic means, through corporate foundations, through private foundations, and individual wealth distribution, to thinking about these issues as something that may impact companies' core strategy, and starting to look at how then companies can integrate ESG issues into how they implement their core strategy. And I believe that BSR has really been there through that full arc, starting when we were really quite activist, trying to raise awareness to companies of how important environmental and sustainability issues are to their core business, all the way through to today when we have CEOs really recognizing that climate change and human rights and inequality are they are no longer kind of ambiguous. They are really quite impactful on the business's ability to exist in 10 years' time.
So in your 15 years, you said the shift from philanthropy to core business strategy. In your opinion, how did that shift come about? What inspired that shift?
I think there's a couple of things that are going on. I believe that people within companies have really started to see the direct impacts of issues such as climate change on their core business, and therefore it's no longer a theoretical impact. It is now something that's very tangible. As you know, we're having to, as we're sitting here with wildfires encroaching on Tahoe today. There are direct implications that are very visible right now that are engaging companies to take action. I also think there has been a bit of a generational shift. I believe that the people who are coming into leader positions today in corporations have been raised with an understanding of sustainability issues that goes beyond what I think business leaders were being trained in the previous generation. That this is part of the oversight and responsibility of a company, just as much as serving shareholders and other stakeholders is. You know, we've seen a shift in how companies talk about their purpose. It's no longer to serve only shareholders. It's also to serve the needs of the many stakeholders that benefit from business growth. And that shift is really increasingly, I think, that is adding momentum to companies' engagement with sustainability issues.
I would agree. I would lay my money on the generational piece, especially.
I'm a little uncomfortable in saying that, however, because I went to business school at a time when global CEOs were standing up on stages and saying, all of these things are happening, but it's okay. The millennials are coming, and they're going to shape how we do business, and they're going to change because they have different values. They care more about the environment and society. And I found that at the time a little bit offensive. Because these people who are in decision-making roles at that moment are seeing, looming on the horizon, these deep issues that are being exacerbated by how we do business, and they're not making changes in advance. They are waiting for the next generation to. And now I understand myself now as a geriatric millennial, coming up on my 40s. I'm now inheriting that kind of lack of decision making, and indeed, working on these issues and trying to push them forward. But I don't think it's fair to kind of put that on the next generation and the next generation after that. I think it's up to us as people engaged in leadership roles to make the hard decisions now.
Yes, and I believe when you mentioned inheriting, you're also inheriting, or we're also inheriting, a slew of opportunities to make a difference.
Indeed. I also think that we've developed a pretty robust toolkit, right? We now know that technologically it is possible to abate climate change. It's now up to us to change cultures and mindsets in order to meet that goal.
So going back to BSR, I see there's 7 core areas of focus. Can you go over those areas?
7 core areas of focus. So our areas of expertise?
Correct.
Sure. So BSR has what we call 7 areas of expertise, and these are topics which we serve companies on to help them advance on material issues that they're facing as they look at sustainability. We think both about the issue areas, such as, and I'll name off four of our areas of expertise, such as climate change, diversity, equity, and inclusion, human rights, and creating a more inclusive economy, and also how we advance women's empowerment. But we also think about how we then embed these areas of expertise in a company's operations, and we do that through our focus on sustainability management and supply chain sustainability. So, looking at how a company embeds these issues and their response to these issues in the policies and practices that the company incorporates, that their actions are holistic in how they approach these issues, both looking at how they engage internally through sustainability management, as well as externally with their supply chain and value chain through supply chain sustainability.
So I'm very interested in supply chain sustainability. Can you share an example of a client that BSR helped specifically when it comes to supply chain?
Sure. One of my favorite projects has been working with companies that are looking to increase the inclusion and diversity of their supply chain, of the inclusion and diversity of the workforce across their supply chain. And through a coalition that I directed over the past couple of years, the Global Impact Sourcing Coalition, we worked to create an incentive system by which a company could request of their suppliers that they employ people from low-income backgrounds directly to work on their accounts. And this created at a coalition level, this created increased market competition amongst suppliers to differentiate themselves with their clients by creating inclusive employment programs and marketing those as part of their differentiating characteristics.
So, putting on a consultant hat for a moment, if you could walk us through, so does BSR go in and do a discovery session first with a client, lay out some metrics, and then do reporting on the back end?
Projects come to us in all different shapes and sizes, and we work with companies that are at the very beginning of their sustainability journey, in which case we start with, quite simply, a materiality assessment, which is to really map out all of the material issues that a company might face in its sector, in the geographies that it's operating in, with the particular clients and customers that it has, to help them see the universe of potential issues. And then prioritize those issues to identify those that are really core to the business, that will, either unleash or inhibit business growth, and those issues that are incredibly important to the stakeholders of the company. And those are the kind of prioritized issues help a company then build meaningful systems and policies and programs around and have a long-term kind of plan for addressing those issues. That's kind of the bread and butter, the basics. And then we go all the way through to, working with some of the world's largest companies to facilitate really in-depth coalitions that are trying to work on systems change together with civil society and sometimes even government.
So I know this must vary a lot, but can you give an idea of an engagement, what it would look like?
Sure. So there's ones that are quite internal, like the materiality assessment that I just described. We might include in that assessment stakeholder interviews to get an outsider perspective and help a company to really understand the issue from multiple perspectives. But then, most of that work is kind of a back and forth with a single client, and we come together during several series of workshops to refine the materiality matrix and develop a strategy to implement on the recommendations. That can take place over the course of usually 4 to 6 months, and it involves a core team here at BSR working with a core team over at the client to advance that individual project. We also have relationships with these that sometimes are quite ongoing. So a company that might establish a strategy with us in one project will then return to us 6 months later to help evaluate the progress of that project and develop out next steps that then evolves into other forms of engagement over time. I think BSR is a membership organization. It really holds us accountable for the recommendations we make, because we have these long-term relationships with companies that we need to see that they're making progress on the sustainability issues that we're advising them on.
And I see that you also do work with governments. Can you give an example of the kind of work you do with them?
Sure. Our main focus is on engaging private sector on sustainability issues. The government can be a partner in that. Sometimes we will engage with governments as donors to raise awareness or advocate to the private sector for a particular policy or issue. We've engaged with several governments on advancing women's empowerment across supply chains, for instance. That resourcing really helps us to develop out much more robust public toolkits and tools and advisory and recommendations than we would through just working on consulting basis with individual companies. So an example of an outcome there was developing the women's empowerment principles tool that helps a company to that's public online. It's a partnership with the UN Global Compact. It's a tool that companies can use to assess their current state of how they're supporting women's empowerment in the workplace, and then steps that they can take to go further.
Thank you. Now, earlier you mentioned impact sourcing. Can you break down exactly what that might be?
Sure. Impact sourcing is a concept that companies can use their procurement spend to have social impact as well as to receive goods and services. So it's a way of looking at your procurement spend and understanding that it can influence your suppliers to not only provide strong services, but also to bundle into the deal inclusive employment programs that bring people out of poverty. So we like to say with impact sourcing that it's a way of using the power of procurement to reduce poverty across the value chains that you're engaging with. It's a concept that we've developed out through the Global Impact Sourcing Coalition, which lasted for the past 5 years. And it has companies such as Google and Facebook and Bloomberg taking a leadership role in engaging with their suppliers to create and to challenge them to employ people that who were previously living below the poverty line or were long-term unemployed. And providing them with good jobs, career opportunities, mentorship, safe workplaces that they can then grow their career and bring themselves and their families out of poverty over time.
Thank you for that clarification. And also, you mentioned collaboration through thought leadership. Is this collaboration between companies, between organizations? What kind of collaboration is this?
Oftentimes we'll bring companies together who want to co-invest in the product, in creation of a new product, in the creation of a new recommendations or guidance document that helps the entire industry or field to understand a topic in more depth, so that this foundational document can then be used for individual companies to take inspiration from and build out their own programs. And so some of our collaborations, and sometimes even just through not even in an ongoing way, but on an individual project, will co-invest in the development of new materials and new thought leadership. We see this as one of the opportunities in bringing companies together, is really leveraging each other's expertise and resourcing and not reinventing the wheel by pooling their resources to create new thought leadership. And what I think is more exciting, perhaps, than the creation of new material is then the next step, which is looking at the opportunities for then collective action, taking it a step further beyond creating a new knowledge resource and thinking through, all right, how do we together continue to co-invest to advance together on the issue that we're focused on.
That's very interesting. Do you ever have competitor companies work together?
We do. And as a nonprofit, I think this is one of the things that distinguishes BSR is that we're able to be a neutral space, a safe space for even competitors to work together in a pre-competitive way to advance on a sustainability issue that is a challenge to the entire industry. So we have a number of safeguards in place to prevent collusion and other legal risks of cooperation between competitors that we're all trained to facilitate, and that then also that enables companies like Coca-Cola and Pepsi to come together into the same room and discuss common challenges.
That must make for some very interesting conversations.
Sometimes it leads to no discussion at all, but ideally, yes.
That's great. So I'm going to switch gears here and get to the crux of our conversation. So I believe you said you've been engaged in this sector for about 15 years. What's your why? What drove you? What made you made the shift to move into this sector?
I'm really interested myself, like personally, in big, hairy issues and challenges, and all the messy. I like cleaning up messes, and I feel like this is a space in which everything is a bit of a mess, and so there's just kind of infinite opportunity to learn and engage with systems challenges, and I find that very exciting. This is a space where there's just a tremendous amount of opportunity for innovation. And it's constantly changing. That dynamic environment is very exciting for me.
While I appreciate you liking to tackle big, hairy issues and the opportunity of innovation, there are many other areas that you could go into with the same challenges. Why specifically this one?
I in my youth had the opportunity to travel, and I think became very aware early on in my life that of inequality in the existence of poverty, and I found that outrageous, and I continue to find that outrageous. So there's a deeper kind of personal motivation in all of my work that is really driven by the desire to bring everybody up to a level that they can enjoy the same level of experience that I've had in my life.
Thank you for sharing that. Where did you travel?
I spent some time in Costa Rica and in Mexico early on, and then Egypt as well.
And I see that you majored in Latin studies. Is that correct?
Latin American studies, yes.
Latin American studies. What moved you to study Latin American?
It's well, I grew up in Texas, and so Hispanic influence was very strong in my childhood. I found Spanish and Latin American culture to be this tremendously exciting doorway into understanding different world perspectives and different ways of being in the world. It was a way of exploring history and language and government, policy, very different from that of the United States. And I found that that was really critical in reshaping my worldview to be more global than I think many people are raised to experience.
I agree. It does give you a whole different perspective when you travel. So, what's the most valuable lesson you've learned about yourself on your journey?
Raj, I still think I'm very much in the middle of my journey. I'm still learning quite a bit about myself. Most recently, as in a director role, which is has been fairly a new position for me. Learning my leadership style and learning from other people's leadership styles. I have been really. I've had the fortune to work under some just tremendously inspiring mentors, and I'm currently practicing different leadership styles and trying to understand, how can I lead people with my own voice and my own style that is inspirational, but also helps bring other people into their power. And I'm finding, I think that I'm less interested in being the person at the front of the pack leading. I'm much more interested in being right in the middle, kind of pushing everyone to be their bigger selves, and that's something that I'm continually experimenting with, and really enjoying seeing people around me push themselves and grow.
Let's stay with leadership for a moment. What do you think are one or two things that are working for you right now in leadership?
I'm in this really interesting position with our collaboration work where I'm starting to see the emergence of collaborative leaders, people who are systems thinkers and networkers, who are coalition builders, both internally within their own organizations as well as externally, who are able to see issues from many different people's perspectives and help to find that unifying factor that brings people to the table to negotiate and find shared value solutions from that negotiation. I hope to be one of those collaboration leaders. I'm very interested in helping to develop a cohort of collaboration leaders because I believe that skill set is going to be increasingly necessary for us to address the world's sustainability issues going forward.
The little I know about the Latin American community and Latin American history, I look at that culture as a very collective culture. Do you feel like some of these themes around collaboration have stemmed from your education in that area or your
That's
exposure to that?
interesting. Yeah, I've never really thought about it, Raja, and I wonder, what's the chicken and egg? Am I drawn to Latin American culture because of its collective nature, or because it resonates with my own, or the other way around? Has it influenced me? I'm not sure.
Well, if you ever find out, do let me know. So let's fast forward for a moment. 2030, if Business Week or Forbes were to write a headline about BSR, what would you like it to read?
2030. 2030 is when we are to achieve the sustainable development goals. And many of these are so mission critical to human development that I really do hope we. I would love to see BSR in the headlines as a leading organization that has been the long term partner for change towards achieving the sustainable development goals. We've been here for the long run. We're investing and innovating with a long-term perspective in mind. And I truly hope that BSR is recognized for its sustained impact and focus on impact during this time.
Yeah, I love the idea of meeting or exceeding the UN SDG goals. A question I forgot to ask you earlier is how do companies find out about you? And B, what size companies do you work with?
Sure. I think we work with multinational companies. So many of the companies that are participating in BSR's membership are Fortune 500. They are international. We have representation from every geography of companies that are participating in our network. And Traditionally, we serve the sustainability teams of these companies. So it's often word of mouth. It's often just by nature of the fact that we've been, around since the 1990s, since the birth of the sustainability movement. And so a lot of times, referrals will come fairly naturally to BSR when it comes to developing a sustainability strategy.
So if there are some smaller companies that are interested in a strategy, does BSR provide any kind of reports or documentation that a smaller company can use on its journey?
I hope so. We most of our guidance and recommendations are designed for pretty mature companies, large, usually international in nature, but a good amount of our recommendations are publicly available and published online. I do understand that SMEs and smaller enterprises are able to access this information, but sometimes it can be a little too robust for their needs. So it's a task of really right sizing to the level of resources and exposure that those companies have to the issues that they're focusing on.
So, Sarah, it leads me nicely to my last question, which is if you could share some advice or words of wisdom, recommendations, it could be professional or personal with the audience, what would it be?
I have a lot of people ask me, since I'm a sustainability consultant, how do you get into how do I get into sustainability? A lot of people coming to me from all sorts of different fields, and I'm increasingly responding that you really don't have to be a sustainability consultant or have sustainability in your title in order to work on environmental, social, and governance. I believe, I've worked with people across all functions in a business, from the procurement teams, finance executives, legal teams, strategy, marketing, you name it. And they've become the point person for managing their company's approach to a material sustainability issue. And that it's really about seeing the opportunity and stepping up, taking leadership to engage on on long-term issues that are affecting your company and your industry in whatever role that you're sitting in, and really thinking of yourself as that leader for change and empowering yourself to take action. And I really encourage people to stop waiting for and looking for that perfect role, and instead kind of become the leader that they want to see in their industry themselves.
I think I heard a quote once, and it says, We are the ones we've been waiting for.
Exactly.
Well, Sara, I appreciate your time today, and I look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Thank you so much, Raj. This was really a pleasure.
Thank you, Sara. Thank you for listening. If you like our show, please give us a rating and review on iTunes. And you can show your support by sharing our show with a friend or reach out to us on social media, where you'll find us under our Nexus PMG handle. If there's a subject or topic you'd like to hear about, send me an email, btu@nexuspmg.com, or contact me via our website, nexuspmg.com. And while you're there, you can sign up for our monthly newsletter, where we share what we're reading and thinking about in the clean tech, green tech sectors. Bigger Than Us is a Nexus PMG production.